Imagine you're standing in front of your home. What's left of it? The wildfire came through 3 days ago. Everything you owned, photos, memories, your kids' baby clothes, gone. You turn on the news, and the head of the Environmental Protection Agency is at a podium, smiling. He's announcing what he calls the single largest act of deregulation in the history of the United States of America. He's eliminating the scientific finding that says greenhouse gases endanger public health. The finding that explains why your house burned down. The finding that justifies doing something about it. Not because the science changed. Not because new evidence emerged. Not because thousands of climate scientists around the world suddenly realized that they were wrong. Because it's inconvenient. Because it justifies regulations. Because acknowledging reality gets in the way of profit. On February the 13th, 2026, the Trump administration rescinded the 2009 EPA Endangerment Finding, the legal and scientific foundation for all federal climate policy in the United States. This isn't a policy debate. This is a declaration that facts don't matter, that science is optional, that reality is whatever serves political purposes. First, let's establish what we're talking about because this matters. In 2007, the Supreme Court ruled in Massachusetts versus EPA that the Environmental Protection Agency could regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act if those gases were found to endanger public health and welfare. So, the EPA did what they're supposed to do. They looked at the science, they reviewed thousands of peer-reviewed studies, they consulted climate scientists, they examined the evidence, and in 2009, they issued what's called an endangerment finding, a formal determination that, yes, greenhouse gases do threaten public health and welfare. That climate change is real, that it's caused by human activity, and that it poses serious risks to Americans. This wasn't political. This was science. The finding has withstood legal challenges for 17 years. It's been reviewed. It's been tested. It survived changes in administration until now. The endangerment finding became the legal foundation for everything the federal government does on climate, fuel economy standards for cars, emissions limits for power plants, tailpipe regulations, energy efficiency requirements. All of it rests on one simple scientific conclusion. Greenhouse gases are dangerous to human health and welfare. On February the 13th, 2026, EPA Administrator Zeldin stood at a White House podium and announced that conclusion is eliminated. He called the endangerment finding the holy grail of federal regulatory overreach. Not wrong, not outdated, not contradicted by new evidence, just inconvenient. Here's what Zeldin didn't say. The science hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten stronger. We now have 17 more years of data. More warming, more extreme weather, more wildfires, more floods, more evidence. But acknowledging that evidence justifies regulation, and regulation is the enemy. So instead of updating the finding to reflect a new science, which would make it even more urgent, they're eliminating it entirely. They're not arguing the science is wrong. They're arguing the science doesn't matter. Let's talk about what this actually means in practice. Without the endangerment finding, the EPA loses its legal authority to regulate greenhouse gases. Tailpipe standards for cars? Gone. Emissions limits for coal plants? Gone. Fuel economy requirements? Gone. Every climate regulation implemented over the past 17 years is now legally vulnerable. The foundation has been pulled out from under them. But it goes deeper than regulations. California has been fining oil companies in court, trying to hold them accountable for climate damages. The state is facing billions in wildfire costs, drought, flooding, infrastructure damage, all linked to climate change. Oil companies have defended themselves by pointing to federal climate policy. They've argued, "You can't sue us in state court because the federal government regulates this. It's federal jurisdiction." Now, the federal government just said it doesn't regulate climate change. It doesn't even acknowledge greenhouse gases are dangerous. As UC Berkeley climate law expert Ethan L. Kind put it, California is struggling with wildfire costs, for example, which are linked strongly to a warming climate. I think that opens up a lot of legal avenues for states like California. Think about what that means. By trying to eliminate climate regulation, the Trump administration may have accidentally opened the door for massive state-level lawsuits against oil companies. They wanted to protect a corporate interest. They may have exposed them to billions in liability. But here's the darker implication. This administration is willing to deny established science to benefit political allies. They're willing to ignore reality to serve corporate donors. And if they'll do it on climate, where the evidence is overwhelming, where thousands of scientists agree, where the impacts are visible in real time, what else will they deny? Public health data, economic statistics, election results? Anything that contradicts the preferred narrative becomes optional. That's not governance. That's ideology replacing reality, and the consequences are catastrophic. California Governor Gavin Newsom's response was immediate. Donald Trump may put corporate greed ahead of communities and families, but California will not stand by. We will continue to lead because the lives and livelihoods of our people depend on it. California is suing. So is Massachusetts. So are environmental groups. And here's where it gets interesting. The federal government's abdication may give states more power, not less. California has unique authority under the Clean Air Act to set its own vehicle emission standards. Other states can then adopt the California standards. About a dozen states currently do. With the federal government abandoning climate policy, California is now free to write its own rules. Tougher standards, more aggressive regulations, and other states can follow. The California Air Resources Board is already considering expanding its powers. Assembly member Robert Garcia introduced a legislation to affirm state authority over pollution from warehouses, ports, and facilities that generate heavy truck traffic. This is the irony. By trying to eliminate climate regulation nationally, Trump may have unleashed a more aggressive state-level action. California represents the world's fifth largest economy. When California sets standards, manufacturers comply because they can't afford to lose that market. So, we may end up with a patchwork. Federal government denying climate change exists. California and a dozen other states implementing aggressive climate policies. Manufacturers caught in the middle, ultimately following the stricter standards because economics demands it. This creates chaos, uncertainty, different rules in different states, no national coordination, no coherent policy. And it demonstrates something profound about American federalism. When the federal government fails, states can step up. but they shouldn't have to. Climate change doesn't respect the state borders. It requires national, actually global coordination. The Trump administration's decision forces states to do what the federal government is supposed to do. It's a dereliction of duty, a failure of leadership, an abandonment of responsibility. And it reveals the administration's priorities. Serving corporate interests matters more than protecting citizens. Denying science matters more than addressing reality. Let's be absolutely clear about something. The science on climate change is settled. Not pretty sure, not probably, not most scientists think. Settled. Thousands of studies, decades of data, overwhelming consensus among climate scientists worldwide. Every major scientific organization on Earth agrees. Climate change is real. It's caused by human activity, and it's dangerous. California Air Resources Board Executive Director Stephen Cliff said it directly when the administration proposed this last year. Thousands of scientists from around the world are not wrong. In this proposal, EPA is denying reality and telling every victim of climate-driven fires and floods not to believe what's right before their eyes. Not to believe what's right before their eyes. That's the core of this. People in California watch their homes burn. People in Florida watch hurricanes destroy their communities. People in the Midwest watch floods devastate farmland. People in the Southwest watch lakes dry up. They saw it. They lived it. They lost everything. And the EPA administrator is telling them it's not happening, or if it's happening, it's not dangerous, or if it's dangerous, the government shouldn't do anything about it. This isn't skepticism. This isn't asking tough questions. This is denial in service of ideology. And here's what makes it particularly insidious. The administration knows it's denial. They're not presenting contrary evidence. They're not debunking the science. They're not offering alternative explanations. They're just saying, we don't care what the science says. We're eliminating the fighting anyway. That's not how evidence works. That's not how science works. That's not how policy in a rational society works. You don't get to ignore reality because it's inconvenient. You don't get to deny facts because they justify regulations you don't like. You don't get to put corporate profits ahead of human lives and call it deregulation. This is a government actively choosing ignorance, deliberately blinding itself to threats its own scientists have identified, abandoning its duty to protect the citizens because acknowledging the threat would require action. And the precedent is terrifying. If established science can be eliminated by executive fiat, what can be eliminated? What facts are safe? What evidence matters? Here's something the Trump administration doesn't seem to understand. The world is moving on without them. Europe has climate policies. China is investing trillions in renewable energy. Major corporations, even oil companies, are planning for a carbon-constrained future. Insurance companies are pricing climate risk into their models. The global economy is adapting to reality. And the Trump administration just decided America will deny reality instead. What does that do to American competitiveness? When China leads in solar panel manufacturing, when Europe leads in electric vehicle technology, when American companies are stuck defending 20th century energy sources while the rest of the world builds 21st century infrastructure. Even many business leaders recognize this is stupid. They want policy certainty. They want to plan for the future. They want to invest in technologies that will matter in 2050. not 1950. But the Trump administration is creating chaos, regulatory uncertainty, policy whiplash, and businesses hate that even more than they hate regulation. Some will benefit in the short term: coal companies, oil refiners, anyone profiting from the status quo. They'll make money while the making is good. But long term, America falls behind. We lose technological leadership. We lose economic opportunities. We cede the future to countries that accept the reality. And when the next administration reinstates climate policy, which will happen because reality doesn't care about politics, we'll have lost years of progress, wasted billions in potential investment, fallen further behind. This isn't just a bad environmental policy, it's bad economic policy, bad strategic policy, bad for American competitiveness and national security. But it's good for donors, good for corporate allies, good for short-term profits. And apparently, that's enough. Here's what I want you to remember from this. On February the 13th, 2026, the United States government officially decided that established science is optional, that thousands of climate scientists can be wrong if acknowledging their right is politically inconvenient, that reality is negotiable. But reality doesn't negotiate. The wildfires will keep burning. The floods will keep rising. The droughts will keep intensifying. The hurricanes will keep strengthening. The cost will keep mounting. And pretending otherwise doesn't make it go away. It just makes us less prepared, less resilient, more vulnerable. California gets this. That's why they're suing. That's why they're writing their own rules. That's why Governor Newsom said they'll continue to lead. Massachusetts gets it. That's why they're joining the lawsuit. They sued to force the endangerment finding in the first place back in 2007. They'll sue to defend it now. Other states will follow because their citizens are suffering, because their infrastructure is failing, because their economies are threatened, and because reality eventually asserts itself. You can deny change all you want, but when your house burns down, when your basement floods, when your crop fails, denial doesn't help. This is a test of whether we're still a country that values science, that respects evidence, that makes policy based on reality instead of ideology. The Trump administration failed that test. They chose denial. They chose corporate interest over human welfare. They chose political expediency over scientific truth. But states don't have to fail. Citizens don't have to fail. And eventually, whether through lawsuits, elections, or economic reality, truth wins. Because you can eliminate a legal finding, but you can't eliminate the climate crisis. It's still here. It's still dangerous. And it still demands action. The question is, will we act based on reality? Or will we waste more years pretending we can wish the problem away? California has made its choice. Other states are making theirs. Eventually, America will have to choose too. Between science and denial, between reality and fantasy, between protecting our future and sacrificing it for short-term profit. That's the choice, and it can't wait forever. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts below, and remember, reality doesn't care about politics.